Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Side Hustler Corner. Today I have with me Philip Ride, who is English but lives in Dubai. And we're going to find out why he got to move to one of the hottest places on the planet, where it's 6 months of the year he hides inside from the heat. But maybe the hint lies somewhere in the fact that it rains a lot in England and he enjoys the sun. So Philip's in transition from consulting, marketing agency. He's moving to a side hustle, does coaching, course creation, and author. So you could say his next new thing is a digital side hustle. He's just put out a new book, and we're going to find out more about that. And it focuses on breaking free of the 9-to-5 and different types of businesses to support that. So, Philip, welcome. It's great to have you here, and interested to hear your story of how you got to be where you are today and some of the fun and challenges of being in a digital world and trying to escape the 9-to-5 of running a digital agency. So, Philip, tell us a little bit about what got you into, I suppose, a digital agency or a consulting agency initially. What was the inspiration for you to start that career?
A passion, really. So I've actually been an entrepreneur since the age of 16, starting in the video games industry, which not a lot of people will think of. But I have always been someone who's enjoyed playing. And that naturally led me to then going online, starting to play in competitions. And so my first, I guess, venture was creating events, online ones, offline ones, doing tournaments, hosting those. And I did that through my formal education and through university. I also then got headhunted to run some of the world's top gaming teams, which, if we look at the press now, is a much larger industry than it was then. This is back in sort of 2001 to 2003. And at the end of my undergraduate degree, I sat there and went, do I want to try and get a real job? Or do I want to try and create something myself and see what I can do? So I created my first consultancy business, sort of digital agency, doing events, doing consultancy for brands, and set that up in 2007. Had it going through to 2009 and the financial crash. So, I had client projects that I was working on. So I think it was that mindset for me to say, I have some experience here. I have something that I can offer that's of value to a certain type of client, certain type of company. So I ended up doing projects for Microsoft and Intel and Telefonica until the financial crisis in 2009. It's like, okay, great. Guess what? You're part of a marketing budget. What's the first thing that gets cut? A marketing budget. So it was a challenging time. And I actually ended up closing that business and moving to a different part of the games industry. I went to work for EA Sports on the FIFA video game. But I think that mindset has always been there of being an entrepreneur and trying to build something, grow something. It just happens that the agency and the consulting was something that I found quite naturally. Having conversations about the industry I was passionate about came easily. So it made sense for me to say, okay, how can I offer this and support people who wants to understand how this industry works, how they can get involved, the things not to do and the things to avoid. So it sort of was just a natural progression from some of the existing, community and fan and passion based stuff that I was already doing.
Right. So what was your undergraduate degree? And is that, I'm about to hear an interesting answer, I'm sure.
Yes. So my original undergraduate degree was meant to be computing visualization, which is computer graphics, because I wanted to go into the industry and start creating the games. But I couldn't do the maths. I actually failed a 2D and 3D graphics module twice and had to change course for my final year. So it ended up becoming computer studies, which was more business focused. So right. In hindsight, that was actually beneficial for me then going in and into the world of the real world outside of university and saying, I'm going to set something up. If I had continued on my original course, I wouldn't be here right now. I would be on a very different path because I would be in the industry creating the games and doing all sorts of other things. So it was a challenge at the time because it's like, oh yeah, congratulations, you've done X, Y, and Z, but you've not ticked this box and therefore you're going to have to change course. So for my final year of my undergraduate degree, I changed course.
Right. So you when you finished it, is that when you started the consultancy? Is that naturally came out of that?
Yes, so I finished that degree, and it was like, okay, yeah, now what? I can try and get a job in the industry that I'm passionate about. I wouldn't be able to get a job in the development side because obviously I'd failed that degree. So I had nothing to say, look, I can demonstrate the competency that's required to go into game development. I've got something that says I maybe understand a bit of business. I have some experience in a part of the industry. Okay, I can try and get the jobs, or I can just create something myself and go and try and do the business development and see what I can make of it. So I did that. Through some of those conversations, I also realized what I had from my undergraduate degree wasn't quite enough. I had the industry experience, but not the business experience. So I then also did a master's in international marketing. Right. I did that the same time, full time, as well as trying to grow a business. So sometimes I make strange decisions and make life difficult for myself.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that nothing's really a failure. It's just a learning opportunity, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something I guess I now come to appreciate. At the time, it's tough, and other people listening may be in that same situation. It's like you're going through something, and it's tough at the time. But if you can get out the other side and look back, you're like, you know what? Actually, yeah, I learned a lot from that experience.
Yeah. Yeah, I started doing accounting and realized I sucked at it and hated it. And I am so glad I didn't do it because my brother did it. And I think he's hated the last 40 years, but that's okay. Within 1 year of doing my accounting degree, I went, I cannot see myself doing this. It was like slash my wrists and go and hide under the doona, right? It was just horrible.
Yep.
So you leave, you start the agency. So the agencies are challenging out there, very project driven generally. Cash flow's tough. So you got this business, but then you came realization that you really didn't want to keep doing this. And that's led you to where you are today, which is to start your own side hustle. Tell us about that moment you said, I'm just over this. When did that happen?
So I guess the main realization for that was through COVID because of the lockdowns. So a lot of the business was still event focused. So suddenly all of the events disappeared. I managed to get some projects to do online things. And that's the great thing about the video game industry is that a lot of the things can also be done online. You can have competitions, you can have marketing campaigns, you can work with influencers, all that sort of stuff. So I was able to secure some projects, but it was tough because people were also looking at their marketing budgets and going, there's a level of uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID. Do we want to spend or do we want to save it and see what happens? So yes, that period was really challenging for the business. And it was like, do I keep going on this path and see what I can do? Or do I decide to start making changes? And there are a couple of other things that happens in my life in that time period. So actually just before COVID, I broke my neck playing sports, couldn't afford the surgery, didn't get the surgery and left it to heal naturally. So that's along with COVID. So that was January 2020. Obviously, we know COVID happened sort of February, March onwards. Those two things together started to change my whole perspective of both life and business, because it's like, I've been given a second chance, but my business isn't working. Maybe I need to start making changes in the business and see what I can do. So I guess those two things hand in hand started to change the direction that I was heading.
So where did the idea for the side hustle that you have today, and tell us, and maybe that includes the title of the book, because this maybe sounds like that distills the essence of what you are trying to get across to people from your own experience of running a 9-to-5 business that didn't work, COVID hit, project-based. So what was the initial idea for your side hustle that you've started now?
So it is coaching. I am an author. I've just launched my second book. But that period, if we take COVID as being mostly 2020 and into 21, I started my own personal development journey in 2021. So there's some things through that, the courses that I took myself, some learnings that I did, people that I started to follow and understand their approach to the space. the thought processes started to be there of, okay, well, yeah, how can I contribute? How can I add value in a slightly different way? My vehicle or my mechanism had been, I'm going to go and sit in an office. I'm going to ingest everything from a business. Then I'm going to write you a strategy, or you're going to give me a brief and I'm going to come back to you with an event proposal. It's like, that's great. But yes, feast and famine project based. How can I take everything else that I've done, the experiences that I've had, the challenges that I've faced, and package that in a slightly different way? So the first part of this journey into, I guess, the side hustle and creating a different type of business was in the education space. So my partner is a teacher. She needed a maths lesson for her students. I knew they all loved a particular game, so I helped her create some resources, which then led me to start creating courses around using video games to improve math skills. My first book was about that and supporting parents with managing screen time and online safety. So I was already starting down that path of saying, okay, how can I create assets and resources that other people can buy, whether it's a course, whether it's a downloadable, whether it's a book. And then through that process, I was doing an online challenge for parents, a 4-day online challenge, again, screen time, online safety, thinking about math skills with video games. And I created a new model and framework, which is the 12 chains. And I looked at that and realized it was actually a model for life. And when I saw it, I was like, freedom has always been my highest level value. That's why I've been an entrepreneur so long, because I wanted that freedom and flexibility to choose my projects, how I use my time, even if the financial side has been a bit more challenging. And so I looked at this model and went, these chains, some of these I've worked through in my own life, some of them I'm still working through, but maybe I need to share this to help other people understand some of the things that may be holding them back so that they can take their next step. So that process, from starting my personal development journey it was probably about April 2021, I launched my first book at the end of 2022. That was all in the education space and supporting the parents. Halfway through 23, I created the 12 chains model. So since June 23, again, it's gone from education to, freedom. Now this sits a bit more closely with me. This is something that I've always valued. This is actually what I feel I need to support the world with. So I've written the new book, which is finally Find Freedom. It talks about those 12 chains, and part of it focuses on business. So the learnings that I've had of the project work and the challenges of that business model, and what I'm now growing on the side to say, how can I create those assets? How can I create the leverage that I want so that I have something that I can sell and make available, but it doesn't always take all of my time. So, that's, I guess, the journey that I've been on, and that realization to say what it is that I have been doing. It's been great. It's given me some amazing experiences and opportunities, but it also doesn't work in terms of the stability that I want and the freedom that I want.
Right. So how are you funding the side hustle? Are you still doing a few projects just to keep bread on the table? Is that so? How are you funding it?
Exactly that. So the existing, I guess, structure of the business and doing the client projects, things like that, is still there. So that is in the background funding the move to the side hustle. And I recognize that that's something that I would need to do in the interim until I can build the side hustle to a point where it's like, right, now I can make that move across. So, is that going to take 6 months, a year? I don't know. But at least I have the clarity now on what it is that I'm building and where I want to go. And that decision that says, this agency thing, I don't want to keep doing this. There will need to be a point where I switch.
Yep.
And it may be that actually, okay, I have to go and get a job. That may just be the reality of it, but it gives me the stability to be able to then also use some of that. If we think about it from a monetary perspective, some of the revenue from being Philip into the side hustle to continue growing that. So how and where and when I get that side hustle to a point where I can switch over, I don't know yet, but I'm committed to saying, whether it's through the agency I already have, even though that's been hit and miss projects, or I get a job, I will find the funds to help grow the side hustle so that I can make that switch across.
So obviously, one of the most important things for a side hustle generally is they come out of not necessarily wanting to make money per se, but more for one of the key elements you said was freedom. And obviously, you sound like you're very passionate about it. How important is this passionate purpose for you in terms of sustaining your journey?
I would say it's a core driver for me now because of the experiences that I had. Having that injury where I could actually have just been laid on the pitch and not been able to get up ever, because breaking your neck could have been the end of everything. That whole change in perspective of life. So now it's, for me, I want to double down and find the freedom that I'm looking for and want in my life, but I also feel compelled to try and support others because I know that life is challenging. It throws us curveballs. So if I can help other people and say, here's a way to look at things differently, maybe work through some of the challenges or the situations. Obviously, I hope the money will come because that will also enable me to have the freedom that I'm looking for. But that contribution and trying to add value to other people, that's now the key driver. So it goes hand in hand with the freedom that I'm looking for. The ability to say, oh, I've got the time to do a podcast or get on stage and do a presentation or create a new course or whatever it is. That's freedom for me, but it's also at the same time aiming to add value to others.
Right. I think that's very important because quite often the journey, people overestimate. It's a great quote by Bill Gates saying people overestimate what they can do in 12 months, but they underestimate what they can achieve in 10 years. So it's basically, that's why passionate purpose that gets you up in the morning is important to be able to run the marathon, which is what it really is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take us through, I think what would be good if you have access to it is, I'd be intrigued by, and I'm sure the audience would be too, what are the 12 chains that you talk about in your book? And you've got access to those to talk about?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's 12 chains that I identified, again, partially through my own life and just thinking about life situations. I have split them into 3 levels. So the first level of chain are those that are focused on self-directed actions, the things that we have more control over. And those chains at level 1 are knowledge, convenience, speed, and relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So knowledge, we often think we have all the knowledge that we need. That's very rarely the case. Mm-hmm. So some of the exercises that I do with people, and I take them through this in the book as well, is creating that vision for the future. What is it that they want to do? How do they want to spend their time? What is it that they want to have as an experience? Some of those things they may need new knowledge for. Mm-hmm. So to break through the knowledge chain, it's about identifying that knowledge that we need to get to help us move forward towards what it is that we want to achieve. So if the vision is living on a desert island and turning a side hustle into a main hustle, again, there may be things that we need to understand. Maybe it's how to blog. Maybe it's how to move to that new country and tax laws and immigration and all those sorts of things. It's like very rarely do we have all of the knowledge that we need. And I had to break through this myself when I wrote my first book. It's like, well, how do I list on Amazon? What do I need to do? What are the requirements, the formatting? So I had to go on that journey myself to say, there's knowledge here that I don't have. I need to gain it if I want to take that next step forward. And it's a self-directed action because we have the ability to control whether we seek out that knowledge and gain it or not. So that's why it sits at level 1, which is the self-directed actions. Convenience, pretty much as it sounds, that extra slice of pizza, that extra episode of Netflix, on demand, instant delivery, all those sorts of things that make our life easier, but actually we run the risk of giving into them. That extra episode of Netflix, well, that could be 45 minutes working on your side hustle. Mm-hmm. So if we can recognize those things, again, we can start to make changes and think about where we spend our focus, our energy, our time. Speed is an interesting one. And I look at this from the perspective of things will always happen in the way that they're meant to happen and at the time that they are meant to happen.
You can't force it.
You can't force it because in one breath, we're like, the world is moving so quickly. Technology, new versions of the iPhone and changes on social media and everything else, and new social media platforms. And then in the other breath, we're like, my business is not growing fast enough. Well, hang on. Okay, so there's two different speeds there. Sometimes we just have to accept and say, things will happen in the way that they're meant to happen. Your business may not be able to take off right now and grow as fast as you want it to, because there's a conversation that you need to have with someone, and that person hasn't yet come into your life. But that one conversation could change everything. So you need to become comfortable with speed in terms of, sometimes, yes, you will move really quickly. And other times, you're just going to have to wait until certain things fall into place. So again, being comfortable with that and knowing that we can follow a path and continue with that helps us break through that chain, because we have the ability to control our actions. Relationships, the final chain at level 1, positive and negative relationships, we all have them. And so the exercise I take people through is a simple rating. Rate all of your relationships 1 to 10. If there are 6 or less and they start to drain you, even if it's family, maybe it's time to spend less of your energy and your time with them, because it's clearly not helping you.
Yep.
I've had to do that with business relationships. The agency side, one of my biggest clients, every time the phone rang and I could see the caller ID, I was like, oh, what's the request going to be now? And it just wasn't helpful. So I actually had to fire that client, because I needed to be comfortable in myself, even though it was going to be a hit on the revenue. Personally, it was not helping me in any way. So relationships are one of the chains. And again, we can control that in terms of who we spend our time with and how we manage those situations. Moving to level 2, chains at level 2 are external influences. So the chains here, again, more about the people around us and the environment. So time, how we use it and who else influences it. Location, whether we choose to be in a location or whether we're being dictated to. Maybe it's the job, maybe it's the family. And then we have responsibilities and priorities. Responsibilities and priorities are interesting, because responsibilities, there are 2 types. Those that we willingly take on and want, and then those responsibilities handed to us by other people that we may not necessarily want. And so over time we go, I really don't want to do this. I don't enjoy this. This is not what I wanted. And so again, we start to have that negative energy and vibe around some of the responsibilities, and it can hold us back, because we can look at something and go, somebody's asked me to do this. I really don't want to. It also means that I'm using time for something that I don't want to do, that I could be spending on my side hustle or with family or doing something else, an activity that I'm, really passionate about. And the same is then true of priorities. Those things that we prioritize, our priority list, and those things that creep in that are actually a priority of somebody else, that we've then made our own priority. Like, the boss wants a report before the end of the day. Well, hang on. That's their priority. Again, I'm speaking if we're still in the 9 to 5 here, but that request from somebody else, it was never on our priority list. It's not something that we probably care about, but suddenly they're expecting us to make it our priority, which again can cause us frustration, because it's like, but that's not how I want to use my time. My priority list is completely different. So thinking about that and understanding it, breaking through is all about, okay, which are the things in my priority list that actually I've been given and I don't want? How can I find a way to mitigate that? Can I hand it back? Can I almost expect it to happen, and therefore I can preempt it and do some groundwork beforehand? Sometimes if we're thinking about the side hustle, it's what are some of the things that I've got coming up that I may be able to preempt? I'm focusing on speaking at events. Okay, so having a speaker bio and a one-sheeter, maybe that's a great way of preempting some of these things, because otherwise a priority comes in and I have to try and move it around in my lists. So those are the chains at level 2. So they're more external influences. And then the chains at level 3 are about the mental images that we create. So risk, fear, perception, and pressure. Fear is an interesting one, because a lot of the time it is just a mental image that we create in our head. Standing up on stage and everybody laughing at us. Is it likely to happen? No, but we get worried about it. And I've been the same. I have forced myself to get up on stage, I guess, more recently as we're having this conversation, because I knew it's something that I needed to become more comfortable with, to be able to set up my own events and be a speaker for the long term. So that's part of my goal. So I had to put myself into that position to say, it's going to be uncomfortable. Yes, I have that image of people laughing at me or falling asleep or just spending all their time on their phones, but I also have a message that can impact maybe just one person, then it's worth it. But we also create images about all sorts of other things. In the book, I write about skydiving. I was fearful of skydiving because I'd created that mental image of going splat, of the parachute not opening and me falling to earth, and that was it, just a horrible mess on the ground. But it's like, how often does that happen? How likely is it that that's going to happen? It's not. But a lot of the time we stop ourselves because we create these mental images. Perception is another great one. We create images of situations, of people, based on what we see, based on what we experience. We also then create images of what we think other people think of us. And we, again, let that stop us. Oh, they're going to think bad about me if I do X, Y, and Z. Who cares? You can't control that. No. They will make a judgment about you regardless. Just do what you need to do. So again, I write about this in the book. It's like, I was invited to speak at a conference with 3 other panelists. It was a games industry conference in Dubai, so it was quite warm. And there was a panelist from Google who was focused on game marketing. So in the Google Play Store and things like that, there was a game developer, and there was somebody from a company who works on the marketing side and supports, I guess, brands getting into the games industry, and potentially some of those integrations of saying, oh, let's put a Coca-Cola or somebody inside a game experience. Okay, so sitting alongside these panelists, they were all wearing black T-shirts and jeans. And I was sat there in a flowery shirt and pink shorts because it was 6 p.m. in Dubai and it was really warm and the stage was outside. It's like, there's no way I'm going to sit in jeans. So I said, I also don't care. I will wear my pink shorts.
Yeah.
I wore yellow trousers on an early date with my partner because why not? So perception, again, is something that we can break free of, but a lot of the time we let it stop us because we're worried what other people think. They're going to make a judgment irrespective, and a lot of the time we can't control that. So those chains at level 4 are about the mental images that we create and that we then let hold us back.
So, yeah, so what you're doing, really talking about, is being human.
Pretty much, yes. Yeah. Just framing it in a different way so people can go, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought about it in that way, because that's the key thing. Sometimes it's just a comment or an experience that changes our perspective, and we can go, that makes sense. Okay, maybe, yeah, I can start to do things differently.
So really, yeah, so what I meant by that too is that really you're talking about what holds us back from being fully human and doing what we really want to do. And we build all these barriers to not do them because we're afraid of change.
Yes.
But if there's enough passionate purpose about what you want to do, you work out a way.
Absolutely. One of the guys I listen to quite regularly is Dean Graziosi.
Yep.
And he often references, it's just about being resourceful. Time is a resource, money is a resource. How do we use those things? If we're passionate about something, we will find a way. We will be resourceful to make things happen.
Exactly. So let's look at, you've got the book, you've got obviously a presentation, you've got a bunch of resources that you can market. And as we quite often realize as solopreneurs, is that it's hard to scale yourself if you're doing all the work. So tell us a little bit about how you promote your book and your business now, the Side Hustle. What's your marketing and promotion look like now?
So for the book, it's free promos every quarter because Amazon enables you to do that. It's looking to list it on some of the other marketplaces, Barnes and Noble, and where there's availability to say it doesn't cost me a lot to be able to list so that I can have that visibility. The book itself is the model and the framework, but it's also lead generation, because I encourage people to download the supporting worksheets to do the exercises in the book. So that's a capture mechanism, brings them into the community, funnels them into the membership community that I have, which is called the Freedom Hunters Club. So there are things that I'm trying to piece together. to ensure that it's not necessarily taking up all of my time, but also so that the marketing that I do is focused. At the minute, I'm going through, I set myself the challenge also to demonstrate to myself and others consistency. I'm doing a year-long challenge of posting a 2-minute video a day, which is something that I'd never historically done. So getting in front of camera and just recording a message every day and posting it, it's like, again, I'm working through fear. I'm working through and demonstrating consistency. That in itself is lead generation, because I can have some interesting conversation on the back of that, people who comment and like and all those sorts of things. So there are a couple of things that I'm trying to put in place to ensure that there's visibility, because at the end of the day, marketing is about visibility. Yes, there's a message that you're trying to portray, but you still need the visibility. So I'm trying to look at the things that I can do that make the most sense. So podcasting, yes, is one. Having the book and potentially doing some paid advertising around that is two. Doing some things on social that I can control and the message that I put out, yes. General paid advertising, not right now, until I can get the business to a point where it makes sense to do that. Because again, there's a test and learn process for that says, what's my ROI? Am I bringing in the type of people that I actually want? Am I being able to deliver the service in the way that it needs to be delivered? Because you can suddenly go, right, here's 10, 15, $20,000 or whatever, and you may get an influx if all your adverts are great, but you can also hear nothing, in which case it's money then not necessarily well spent. You'll get some learning, but that doesn't necessarily help the bottom line. So it's about being considered in the incremental steps that you take. So a lot of it right now is what's minimal spends to demonstrate that there's interest and there's traction. So a lot of that will be focused on the book, and the spend will be there. Everything else is just about my time and how I choose to use it. So creating some of the videos, being on podcasts, speaking at events, and then building out from there.
So what are some of the platforms and tools that you're using currently? Let's deal with the platforms. So things like website, blog, what social media platforms do you find important? Firstly, that, and the second question, once we're done deal with that, is what are the different tools that you're using to help you scale yourself?
Yeah. So I can actually, I guess, combine some of those in some senses. One of the main platforms I'm using is ClickFunnels, because it enables me to build sort of the traditional sales pages and that funnel flow of, okay, you've just registered for the free resources from the book. Okay, great. Oh, I'm going to show you another page that's your thank you page. And now it's like, if you want other stuff, here are your options. So it's quite quick and easy to build those, but I can also have my membership and community on the same platform. So I can easily guide people through a flow and a process into that membership community. I can host my courses in there and some of the other materials that I'm making available to people. So that's a big one for me, because it enables me to do multiple different things. From a social media perspective, my daily challenge that I've set myself, that's going onto TikTok. It's onto Instagram as well. I'm posting into a number of Facebook groups who have the type of people that I'm trying to support. Am I on every social media platform ever? No, I looked again at Twitter and I was like, historically, Twitter was the one that I loved because I could have conversations. It was short form content. But I, as a person, have changed since then. So when I was working at EA Sports, my role as a community manager, I had my own branded account because I was the liaison and the go-between between the game developers and the players. So Twitter was, a platform, X as it now is, was a platform that I spent a lot of time on and was quite comfortable with and enjoyed using it. Now thinking about starting fresh, when there's so many other things that I want to spend my time and effort on, it feels like a slog thinking about what I'm going to write every day and having that consistency and knowing that I need to post multiple times a day. Every other platform, I only post once a day because I also don't want it to drain me. If I have to spend too much time thinking about it, that's not a positive. Mm-hmm. Again, I'd rather go and spend my time doing something else or thinking about something else, writing another book, because again, that's what I find reasonably easy and enjoy. So yes, I'm not on every social media platform, focusing on a couple to start with. and then it'll build out from there. ClickFunnels is a great tool. I use a couple of other things. So I use ActiveCampaign for my emails. So there's integrations there, and I have some of my automations set up. So if you come through and register anywhere, you'll probably get a couple of emails that says, hey, thanks very much. And okay, did you know this about me? And have you seen this? And all those sorts of things. There are a couple of tools that I've experimented with. So UpViral is one of those for doing viral giveaways and referral programs and things like that. So if somebody was to download a free copy of my book or the worksheets or anything else, they will get a referral link. Then if they go and share it with their network, I potentially give them a free copy of this or a t-shirt or something else. So again, I've set it up, I've made it available, I may promote that, but then the hope will be that people who get involved in that, download the resource or whatever it is, will spread that further, so that I then am not necessarily spending as much marketing budgets on those things. So that's something that I've started to have a play with and see how it goes. So there are a couple of core things in there. There are other minor tools, some social media management tools that I've been playing with, Metrical, Socialmonials, and various other things. But the core is ClickFunnels, because I've got my community there and I can do my sales pages. I actually moved my personal website away from normal web hosting onto ClickFunnels, and now it's just a one-pager.
Right.
And so everything, again, ties into that. And then I have ActiveCampaign as my email platform currently.
Yeah, it can get very overwhelming, can't it? Especially if you're not in the digital game. And you've obviously been playing in digital for quite a long time now. So let's have a couple of quick questions before we wrap it up. One, so you're trying to do a short video. I mean, as we know, when I started my blog, text was all the rage, blogging was hot. And typically what we've moved on from there is mobile phone came out, bandwidth increased, price of data decreased. So and then tools like Instagram came out. They started with just images. Then when they moved on to Reels, TikTok came out. So where do you get most of your engagement from, which the data and analytics will tell you about? Where are you getting the most engagement from your marketing and content creation?
So far, it's in some of the Facebook groups that I'm part of, and then TikTok. And I'd say there's a couple of considerations here. Is that because I don't feel really comfortable with these platforms, I'm doing what works for me. So it's a 2-minute video, which actually counts against me because I can't post a YouTube short. I can't post a reel, because it's too long. So some of those platforms I'm not using in the best way possible because I myself aren't yet at the point where I can do here's a 60 second, here's my 3 tips for X, Y, and Z. It's like, that doesn't feel comfortable to me yet. I may get to that point, but right now, because I like to waffle, you'll have recognized that on this podcast, it's easy for me to do a 2-minute video. And so I just post those and have to see what happens because it doesn't fit within the nice box that those platforms want in terms of the content that's submitted to them. So yes, the Facebook groups, slightly different in that respect because you can scroll through, you can see the posts, what's interesting to you, watch it or not watch it. Some of the other platforms, it's very hit and miss. TikTok is the one that seems to be in that comparison between TikTok and Instagram. Again, that may be the way that I've set things up, the way that I'm posting or the hashtags, but certainly the engagements on TikTok seems to be a little better.
Yeah, it's really interesting about content, and we're experimenting a little bit of AI, created content, taking long video and then cutting it up into snippets, which are typically 30 seconds to a minute that we can then post across YouTube Shorts, Instagram Reels, and TikTok. But yeah, putting that together is very time consuming, and also it gets very frustrating going, nothing's happening, and yet behind the scenes everything's happening in terms of people are sharing, they are spreading. We live in a very, very crowded digital world now, and it's only going to get more crowded.
Yeah.
And that becomes a real challenge. So just one question I'm curious about is, do you blog at all? Do you write long form content? because you can write long form content that could be a chapter of a book each day, and then you could just actually aggregate that and turn it into a book. Do you write blog posts at all, or guest blog? Do you do any of those?
Not anymore.
Right.
And so long form content I enjoy writing. I've written my second book. I actually used to blog regularly. So, in previous roles, focusing on community building and things like that, I had a personal blog and would post, 2 times a week based on what was happening in the forum that I was managing and the conversations with other community managers and things like that. And so, yes, I started to build up an audience around that. But I've also got to that point. It's like, if I'm blogging, I also have to think about the SEO game. Do I want to spend my time doing that?
Yeah,
not really. I'd want to focus on something else. So again, I've made that decision. And every time I've launched a new version of our website, I've gone, all right, I'll blog a bit. And then I get 3 minutes into it. I'm just like, man, I'm drained again. So that's why I've just moved to just a 1-page personal website, because it's like, I don't want that hassle. I understand the benefits if I can commit to it, but I'd rather spend my time doing other things. So yes, I understand the power of blogging. Am I doing some guest articles elsewhere? Yes, because those people already have an audience that I can tap into. But for me personally, blogging and trying to grow something myself, I've made the decision to not focus on that anymore.
Right. Yeah, it's a very, very long game. And the algorithms of Google will do your head in, just like the algorithms of social media will do your head in. So just to wrap it up, Philip, what are some top tips you'd offer to other wannabe side hustlers that are already, or those that are already on the side hustle journey? They're trying to fund it. They're feeling frustrated. They have doubts like we all do. It's called being human. What are some top tips that you'd like to share with the audience, just as a final takeaway?
So the first one would be about the type of business or the type of side hustle. Is it something that works right now in terms of your life situation? If you're still in a 9-to-5 as an example, and you're creating a side hustle and you have that goal to move across to it, is it something that you can keep doing in the long term? Or as it grows, is it going to suck more of your time? In which case you've just replaced your job.
Mm-hmm.
So think about it from that perspective and say, is there a way that I can structure this? And the exercises that I've done for my own business, create assets, make things a little easier. So it doesn't necessarily need to be coaching and courses, but it could just be, there's something that I repeat on a regular basis. So there's a process. There's an onboarding for a client. Now, can I create a form that I can just give to everybody and it frees up my time because I don't need to do an initial call with them? What are some of those things that you can create as assets that will make your life easier? I mean, you don't necessarily need to spend all of your time in every situation. The second one would be thinking about the chains, thinking about the things that are actually impacting you from taking the action that you need to take. Maybe it's reaching out to people, maybe it's getting on video. What are some of those things that are holding you back? So obviously that's a plug for the book, because it'll help you uncover all of those. And we've been through some of them on this session, but I go into more detail with some more stories. So if we can identify those things in ourselves, again, like anything, as soon as we see it or understand it, it enables us to start making changes. And then the final thing that I would talk about is from a side hustle perspective, how are you making your revenue? Is it consistent? Is it one-off? Is it a subscription thing? Is it services based? What is going to be generating the revenue for you? And is it going to be feast and famine? Because if it's feast and famine, it's going to be more difficult to grow it to a point where you can move across and it to become your main gig. If there's something else that you can do, retained services are much better than project-based. Subscription models, again, much better, may take longer to build, but trying to have that consistency enables you to think about making that switch over. Because if you say, I've got one big project and it pays me for the next 6 months or a year, you then still need to find what comes after that. So if you make that move across, there's still that risk of getting to the end of the project or the contract and saying, okay, now what? I've been in that situation. It's not fun. So those would be some of the things that I would say.
Thanks, Philip. They're 3 really great tips, and congratulate you on taking the step into starting your own side hustle. And it sounds to me like it was a life crisis that tipped you into this. And you mentioned that you broke your neck and then you had to take a little bit more. You had time, I suppose, the headspace to think about life in a much deeper way. And quite often the opportunities in life don't come out of the good times, they come out of the hard times. And it sounds like you've what could have been a life-threatening injury has turned into an opportunity to start your own side hustle and create your own journey for freedom and happiness. Thank you very much for sharing your story. And I look forward to hearing more about your next books and the success of what you're doing. Thank you, Philip. It's been an absolute pleasure.